Before Rambo became a symbol of unstoppable strength, he was almost something entirely different. First Blood nearly ended with its hero dead, its tone far bleaker, and its message completely unrecognizable. The film we know today wasn't built on confidence. It was shaped by fear, compromise, and last-minute decisions that changed everything. Test audiences rejected early versions, the lead actor nearly walked away, and producers scrambled to salvage a project spiraling out of control. What almost destroyed this movie is exactly what made it a classic, and it all starts with an ending that was never supposed to let Rambo walk away. Number 1. Rambo's original death. The novel that inspired the film had no interest in sequels or heroic arcs. In David Morrell's original story, Rambo dies at the end, taken out by Colonel Troutman, the man who trained him. It was a brutal, deliberate conclusion that framed the entire narrative as a tragedy, with no survivors. The movie was initially scripted to follow this exact path, with Stallone's character meeting the same fate. When test audiences saw this ending, the reaction was devastating. Viewers had grown attached to Rambo despite his violence. They didn't want to watch him fall, they wanted him to survive. Producers panicked. The bleak finale that worked on the page felt unbearable on screen. Audiences weren't rejecting the story, they were rejecting the hopelessness of its conclusion. The decision to let Rambo live changed everything about what this film would become. A standalone tragedy transformed into the foundation for a franchise. That single choice, made out of fear, not vision, turned a broken soldier into an icon. Without it, there would be no sequels, no cultural phenomenon, and no Rambo as the world knows him today. Number 2. Stallone almost left. Early versions of the script painted Rambo as something close to a monster. He was violent, unsympathetic, and difficult to root for. When Stallone read the material, he saw a character audiences would despise rather than understand. The tension between his vision and the existing script nearly ended his involvement before filming even began. Stallone pushed hard for changes that would humanize Rambo. He wanted the violence to feel defensive rather than predatory. He wanted silence instead of aggression, trauma instead of rage. The production resisted at first, but Stallone held firm. Without these adjustments, he was prepared to walk away from the project entirely. His persistence reshaped the character from the ground up. The Rambo who appears on screen carries weight and pain rather than empty brutality. Stallone understood that audiences needed to feel something beyond fear. By threatening to leave, he forced a creative reckoning that ultimately saved the film from becoming forgettable. Number 3. Audiences changed the film. Early cuts of the film leaned into darkness without restraint. The violence was harsher, the tone more punishing, and the emotional beats more difficult to absorb. When these versions screened for test audiences, the feedback was clear. Viewers felt battered rather than moved. They disconnected from a story that offered no emotional relief. Producers took this feedback seriously and began softening specific moments throughout the edit. Scenes were trimmed, reactions adjusted, and the pacing reworked to allow breathing room. The goal wasn't to remove the edge entirely, but to make it bearable. Audiences needed space to process what they were watching without feeling assaulted. This process turned viewer rejection into a creative tool. The final cut balanced brutality with empathy in ways the original version never attempted. What emerged was a film that could disturb without alienating, a tonal tightrope that only existed because early audiences refused to accept anything less. Number 4. Rambo wasn't a hero. The filmmakers never intended for audiences to cheer Rambo on. He was designed as a cautionary figure, a man destroyed by war and abandoned by his country. Every act of violence was meant to underscore tragedy, not triumph. The character existed to provoke discomfort, not admiration. Audiences interpreted him differently. They saw resilience where the filmmakers saw damage. They saw strength where the story intended brokenness. Rambo's survival skills and determination read as heroic, despite every effort to frame them otherwise. The disconnect between intention and reception became impossible to ignore. This gap between design and perception defined the character's legacy. Later films leaned into the heroic image audiences wanted, abandoning the original tragic framework. The Rambo of First Blood remains distinct, a figure meant to haunt rather than inspire, even if viewers refuse to see him that way. Number 5. Teasel's lost story. David Morrell's novel didn't favor one perspective over another. Sheriff Teasel received just as much attention as Rambo, with chapters dedicated to his background, his insecurities, and his own war trauma. The book presented two damaged men on a collision course, each sympathetic in their own way. Neither was purely villain or hero. The film stripped away most of this balance. Teasel became an obstacle rather than a parallel figure. His motivations shrank to stubbornness and pride, while Rambo's inner world expanded to fill the narrative. Audiences never learned why Teasel acted the way he did, or what battles he carried from his own past. This simplification sharpened the story, but flattened its moral complexity. The novel asked readers to hold sympathy for both men simultaneously. The movie made choosing sides easier, and in doing so, transformed a nuanced conflict into something closer to a traditional showdown. Number 6. The Fake Town of Hope. The fictional town of Hope feels like a real, oppressive place throughout the film. Its streets seem interconnected, its geography consistent, and its hostility almost architectural. But the location audiences see on screen never actually existed as a single place. Filmmakers constructed Hope from multiple separate locations across British Columbia, stitching together footage to create the illusion of one unified, suffocating small town. Editors and cinematographers worked carefully to maintain geographic continuity between shots filmed miles apart. Camera angles were chosen specifically to hide inconsistencies, while set dressing ensured visual elements matched across different locations. The goal was to make Hope feel claustrophobic and inescapable, a town that traps Rambo both physically and psychologically. Every frame reinforced the sense that this place existed as a complete, hostile environment. This geographic illusion became essential to the film's atmosphere and emotional impact. Audiences needed to believe Hope was real for the story's tension to work properly. The seamless construction of a fictional town from scattered real locations demonstrates how carefully the production approached world-building. What appears effortlessly authentic on screen required meticulous planning and precise execution behind the scenes. Number 7. Nature Fought Back. Filming in the wilderness of British Columbia presented challenges that no amount of preparation could fully anticipate. The terrain was unforgiving, the weather unpredictable, and the physical demands on cast and crew exceeded anything a studio backlot would require. What appears as rugged beauty on screen functioned as a constant obstacle during production, creating delays and injuries throughout the shoot. Cast members faced genuine physical danger navigating the landscape. Steep hillsides, dense undergrowth, and unstable footing made every outdoor scene a calculated risk. Crew members hauling equipment through the forest endured conditions that tested their endurance daily. The elements refused to cooperate. Rain arrived unexpectedly, temperatures dropped suddenly, and natural light disappeared faster than schedules allowed. This constant battle against nature ultimately enhanced the film's authenticity in ways controlled environments never could. The exhaustion visible on screen wasn't entirely performance. The desperation in chase sequences carried real physical strain behind it. By forcing production into genuinely hostile conditions, the wilderness became an unintentional collaborator, delivering a rawness that studio shoots rarely capture. Number 8. The Deadly Cliff Stunt. The sequence where Rambo leaps from a cliff into trees below ranks among the film's most memorable moments. It also nearly ended production entirely. Stallone performed significant portions of the stunt himself, and during filming, the landing went badly wrong. The impact caused real injuries, cracked ribs that left the actor in genuine pain for weeks afterward. Production faced an immediate crisis. Their leading man was hurt, shooting schedules were already tight, and shutting down for recovery would devastate the budget. The decision was made to continue filming despite Stallone's condition. Scenes were adjusted to accommodate limited mobility, and pain management became part of the daily routine. The show pressed forward because stopping wasn't financially viable. The injury's effects are visible throughout the film if you know where to look. Certain movements appear restricted, and the physical strain on Stallone reads as more than just acting. Real pain leaked into performance, creating an authenticity that scripted suffering rarely achieves. What nearly destroyed the production accidentally contributed to its visceral impact. Number 9. The Real Helicopter Danger. The helicopter pursuit through the forest stands out as one of the film's most intense sequences. Rambo scrambles across treacherous terrain while the aircraft hunts him from above, creating genuine tension that feels different from typical action choreography. That difference exists because much of the fear captured on camera was completely real. The filming conditions were genuinely dangerous for everyone involved. Unpredictable wind patterns, limited maneuvering space, and the proximity of actors to rotating blades created an atmosphere of controlled chaos. The pilots pushed boundaries to get shots that felt dynamic and threatening. Cast and crew on the ground operated with full awareness that mistakes could prove catastrophic. This authentic danger translates directly to the screen in ways audiences instinctively recognize. The urgency in Rambo's movements, the instability of the shots, and the rawness of the sequence all stem from real conditions. No amount of movie magic could replicate the genuine unease that permeated that set. The scene works precisely because the fear was never manufactured. Number 10. Rambo's deadlier traps. Rambo's survival skills include constructing improvised traps throughout the forest, demonstrating his training and resourcefulness. Early versions of the script featured traps that were significantly more extreme, designed to cause maximum damage and leave little to imagination. These sequences would have pushed the film into territory far more graphic than what eventually appeared on screen. Producers scaled back these elements for multiple reasons as production progressed. Practical concerns about filming dangerous contraptions safely played a role. But more importantly, creative discussions revealed that excessive violence would undermine the character's relatability. If Rambo's traps felt gleefully brutal, audiences might lose sympathy for him entirely. Restraint became a storytelling tool, rather than simple censorship. The final trap sequences balance effectiveness with restraint in ways that strengthen the narrative. Viewers understand Rambo is dangerous without being repulsed by gratuitous cruelty. The pulled punches actually make the character more compelling, a man capable of worse, who chooses proportional responses. Limitation improved the film precisely because it forced more thoughtful creative choices. Number 11. Why Rambo stayed silent. The original screenplay gave Rambo far more lines than what ended up in the finished film. He explained himself more frequently, verbalized his trauma explicitly, and engaged in conversations that spelled out his mental state for audiences. Stallone recognized that this approach undermined the character's power. A man broken by war and abandoned by society wouldn't narrate his suffering, he would internalize it until he couldn't anymore. Stallone systematically removed dialogue throughout production, replacing words with silence and expression. Scenes that once featured explanations became moments of pure physicality and reaction. The actor understood that Rambo's trauma would register more powerfully through what he didn't say than through any speech. Every cut line forced audiences to read the character rather than simply listen to him. This commitment to minimalism distinguished Rambo from nearly every action hero of the era. While other protagonists delivered quips and monologues, Rambo communicated through presence and restraint. The famous breakdown scene near the film's end lands with devastating impact precisely because it shatters established silence. Stallone's editorial instincts transformed a conventional script into something far more affecting and cinematically sophisticated. Number 12. Teasel saw himself hero. Brian Dennehy approached Sheriff Teasel as a straightforward antagonist doing his job. In his interpretation, the sheriff was simply a lawman confronting a dangerous drifter who refused to follow basic instructions. Dennehy didn't play the character as a villain. He played him as someone enforcing order against a genuine threat. This perspective informed every scene he performed throughout production. The disconnect between Dennehy's approach and audience perception created an interesting tension in the final film. Viewers overwhelmingly sided with Rambo, interpreting Teasel's actions as bullying and abuse of authority. What Dennehy saw as reasonable law enforcement, audiences experienced as cruelty and escalation. The actor's conviction that his character was justified reads on screen as arrogance and hostility. This interpretive gap actually enriches the film rather than undermining it. Teasel's certainty in his own righteousness makes him more frightening than a self-aware villain would be. Dennehy's commitment to his interpretation creates a character who genuinely believes he's the hero of his own story. The collision between two men who both see themselves as justified gives the conflict moral weight that pure good versus evil storytelling lacks entirely. Number 13. The hidden message. Early versions of the film contained sharper, more explicit criticism of how America treated its Vietnam veterans. Dialogue directly addressed institutional failures, and certain scenes functioned as pointed commentary on government neglect. The message was clear and confrontational. Audiences would leave understanding exactly what the filmmakers wanted to say about veterans and the systems that abandoned them. Test screenings and studio feedback prompted significant softening of these elements during post-production. Explicit statements became implications. Direct accusations transformed into subtext. The political message remained embedded in the story, but it no longer announced itself quite so loudly. Producers worried that heavy-handed messaging would alienate viewers who came expecting action rather than social commentary. The final film achieved something more effective than its earlier versions attempted. By burying its politics beneath character and emotion, the movie reaches audiences who might resist explicit messaging. Viewers absorb the critique through Rambo's suffering rather than through speeches about policy failures. The restraint forced by commercial concerns accidentally made the film's commentary more durable and harder to dismiss. Number 14. The music reframed Rambo entirely. Jerry Goldsmith's score accomplished something the raw footage alone could not achieve. Early edits of the film felt emotionally flat, the violence registered, but the tragedy underneath remained difficult to access. When Goldsmith's music entered the picture, the entire emotional landscape of the movie shifted dramatically. Suddenly, audiences understood they were watching a story about pain rather than just survival. Goldsmith composed themes that emphasized melancholy and loss rather than action and triumph. The music told viewers how to feel about Rambo before he ever spoke a word. Moments that played as merely intense without score became genuinely heartbreaking with it. The composer understood that this film needed to function as a character study, and his music constantly reinforced that interpretation. The transformation was so complete that the film became inseparable from its score. Try to imagine key scenes without Goldsmith's work, and they lose tremendous emotional power. His music didn't accompany the story. It revealed what the story was actually about. Few films demonstrate so clearly how a composer can fundamentally redefine a movie's meaning through sound alone. Number 15. 2 endings, 1 choice. Production filmed both possible conclusions to the story within the same shooting day. In one version, Rambo dies, either by his own hand or at Troutman's, depending on which draft you reference. In the other, he survives and surrenders to authorities. Both endings were captured completely, with full performances and coverage. The filmmakers genuinely didn't know which version would work until they tested both. This approach reflected the deep uncertainty surrounding the project's final form. Nobody could predict with confidence how audiences would respond to either conclusion. The death ending honored the source material and completed the tragedy properly. The survival ending offered hope and, not coincidentally, franchise potential. Filming both provided insurance against making an irreversible wrong choice. When test audiences overwhelmingly rejected the death ending, the decision became clear. The survival footage saved the film from a conclusion that might have doomed it commercially. But that alternate ending still exists, a glimpse into the darker, more uncompromising version of the story that almost was. The film audiences embraced was quite literally a last-minute choice. Number 16. The power of silence. Counting Rambo's actual lines throughout the film reveals something striking about the character's construction. He speaks far less than virtually any action protagonist of his era. While other heroes delivered constant quips, threats, and explanations, Rambo communicates primarily through action and expression. This wasn't an accident or a limitation. It was a deliberate creative choice that defined everything about how audiences experience the character. The silence serves the story's psychological foundation in essential ways. Rambo is a man who has been ignored, dismissed, and forgotten by the society he served. His inability or unwillingness to articulate his suffering reflects the isolation that defines his existence. Words failed him long before the film begins. They failed when nobody listened to veterans returning from war. His quiet isn't stoic coolness but accumulated damage. This approach created a template that few action films have successfully replicated since. The restraint requires tremendous confidence in visual storytelling and audience intelligence. Most productions don't trust viewers to read a character without constant verbal guidance. By letting Rambo exist primarily in silence, the film demands active engagement rather than passive consumption. The choice remains bold decades later. Number 17. The knife that defined Rambo. No one involved in production anticipated that Rambo's survival knife would become one of cinema's most recognizable weapons. The blade was designed for practical purposes, a tool that made sense for a character with special forces training operating in wilderness conditions. It needed to look functional and military appropriate. Beyond those basic requirements, little thought went into its potential cultural impact. Audiences responded to the knife with unexpected intensity after the film's release. It represented self-reliance, danger, and survival in a single iconic object. Merchandise appeared almost immediately, with replicas selling in enormous quantities throughout the 1980s. The knife became synonymous with the character himself, a visual shorthand that required no explanation. This accidental iconography demonstrates how movie mythology forms through audience adoption rather than studio intention. The filmmakers created a prop. Viewers transformed it into a symbol. Nothing about the knife's design suggested it would transcend the film so completely. Cultural artifacts emerge from unpredictable connections between audiences and images, and no amount of marketing can manufacture what happened organically with that blade. Number 18. The title misled early audiences. The phrase, "First Blood," suggested something very different to audiences encountering the film without context. Many expected a straightforward action movie, perhaps a martial arts film or a revenge thriller, with plenty of combat and clear villains. The title promised violence and confrontation, which the movie certainly delivers, but it delivered those elements wrapped in psychological complexity that marketing materials barely hinted at. Early viewers who arrived expecting simple thrills found themselves watching something far more challenging and uncomfortable. The violence wasn't cathartic or triumphant, it was desperate and sad. The hero wasn't heroic in conventional ways. Audiences needed time to adjust their expectations and engage with what the film actually offered, rather than what they assumed it would provide. This initial confusion eventually worked in the film's favor as word spread about its true nature. Viewers who might have avoided a serious drama about veteran trauma discovered it through action movie marketing. The title functioned as a gateway, drawing audiences into territory they wouldn't have chosen deliberately. What seemed like misdirection became effective outreach to viewers who needed convincing. Number 19. The sheriff was fear-driven, not evil. Sheriff Teasel operates from recognizable human motivations rather than cartoon villainy. He sees a drifter who looks like trouble and wants that potential problem gone from his town. When Rambo refuses to leave and then resists arrest, Teasel's responses escalate proportionally to his growing fear. Every aggressive action stems from a man losing control of a situation he thought would resolve simply. The film refuses to make Teasel a monster despite positioning him as the antagonist. He represents institutional authority, flawed, frightened, and committed to maintaining order through increasingly desperate measures. His deputies follow his lead, not because they're evil, but because they trust their sheriff's judgment. The entire law enforcement response grows from one man's mistake compounding repeatedly. This portrayal adds moral weight that pure villainy would eliminate entirely. Teasel isn't wrong that Rambo is dangerous. Events prove that assessment accurate. His failure lies in how he handles the situation, not in identifying a threat. The film asks audiences to hold two truths simultaneously. Teasel causes tremendous harm, and Teasel believes completely that he's protecting his community. Both things remain true throughout. Number 20. Rambo's final chapter. Every creative decision in the film points toward a complete, self-contained narrative. The character arc reaches resolution. The thematic questions receive answers. The emotional journey arrives at a destination that requires no continuation. Nothing about the storytelling suggests that sequels were anticipated or desired. This was designed as a singular statement about one man's breaking point and the society that brought him there. The sequels that followed fundamentally altered what Rambo meant as a character and cultural figure. Later films emphasized action over psychology, triumph over tragedy, and spectacle over intimacy. The broken veteran became an unstoppable warrior. The critique of institutional failure transformed into celebration of individual power. Whatever the original film tried to say got buried beneath franchise demands. Watching the first film with knowledge of what came after creates a strange viewing experience. The careful, melancholy character study exists in tension with the bombastic legacy that followed. The Rambo of this story would barely recognize himself in later installments. What was meant to end here instead became a beginning, but something essential was lost in every continuation. Number 21. Rambo became the opposite message. The transformation of Rambo from cautionary figure to celebration represents one of cinema's strangest cultural inversions. The original film presented a man damaged beyond repair, abandoned by his country, and driven to violence by desperation. Audiences were meant to feel disturbed by what created him and horrified by what he became. The story functioned as criticism, not endorsement. Sequels and cultural adoption flipped this meaning completely over the following decades. Rambo became a symbol of American strength and military prowess. Politicians invoked his name when discussing intervention and toughness. The character designed to question war transformed into a mascot for it. The irony would be stunning if it weren't so thoroughly documented. This reversal says more about audiences than about the film itself. People found in Rambo what they wanted to find, regardless of authorial intent. The lonely, traumatized figure resonated less than the survivor who fought back against overwhelming odds. The message that emerged from cultural absorption bore little resemblance to what filmmakers put on screen. Rambo's legacy became a mirror reflecting what viewers brought to it, rather than what the story actually contained. First Blood succeeded not because of careful planning, but because of constant adaptation. Every iconic element emerged from compromise, fear, or accident. The ending that launched a franchise was a last-minute change. The silence that defined the character came from deleted dialogue. The emotional resonance arrived through a composer's interpretation. A cleaner, more confident production might have been forgotten within a decade. Instead, the struggle produced something genuinely raw, with imperfections that contribute to an authenticity polished action films rarely achieve. If you enjoyed uncovering these hidden truths, hit like and subscribe for more secrets from cinema history. Which First Blood revelation changed how you see the film the most? Tell us in the comments.